All right, good morning, everyone. It is 11:32 and we'll get started promptly. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Vincent Atchity, President and CEO of Mental Health Colorado, and this is the monthly group that we've been convening of fellow Coloradans who are working to disentangle mental health and criminal justice in one important way or another. And today we're very pleased to be joined by guests from North Colorado. We've got Judge Susan Blanco and her colleagues, Jean Klevansky, Matt Landers, Mike Mangione, Mark Stiger, Jess Fear, and April Moore. And apologies if I mispronounced anyone's name. And what we do is we have half an hour for some presentation of the work and some questions and answers between the top of the hour and a quarter past, so that we're done promptly by 12:15 at the latest. And we do this every Thursday. I'm sorry, every month on this Thursday. So thank you so much, Judge Blanco. Please go right ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you for welcoming us. I think I'm also going to introduce Denise Cosgrove, and she is here. She is our kind of navigator liaison from Office of Behavioral Health. And so she's here as well. I wanted to just tell you, we're here to present about the competency docket. I cannot imagine why I could speak better than all of these individuals and all the different roles that they have. And so what we have kind of scheduled for this afternoon is to, or this morning, to kind of break up why the program is created, how it works, how people come into the program, how the cases are processed, what kind of supports we put in place for long-term stability for individuals, what are our outcomes and exit strategies and goals, and then finally, kind of what is the future looking like for what we're working on here in the 8th, which is up in the Fort Collins, Loveland, northern area. So if each of you, I'm going to kind of navigate us through this and kind of maintain the time. If each of you wants to just, as you're first speaking, maybe just say what organization, what your role is in all of this, that would, I think, be helpful for folks. So I'm going to pass this along first and foremost, just for a few minutes for us to hear why we created the program and who it serves, by first passing this to Jean Klevansky. Jean?
Thank you, Judge. And Denise, please jump in if you want to as well, because you're definitely part of the process. So a couple of years ago, I worked with the Bridges program, working as a court liaison. Before that, I worked in the jail for many years. So I saw all aspects of the competency process, and Mark will speak more about the jail piece. But what I saw is a confusing process for many involved. Different courtrooms had different philosophies, different processes, and did not always work towards the same goals. So I thought just a forum where we can have the same team, the same communication, same time of the week would help solve some of those problems. To be honest, some of that was selfish, but also for the population that, it's underserved, overlooked. These people are high needs, and having the experts in the room to make creative decisions was very important, because the court system, justice system often is a one size fits all process. People in mental health are not, and solutions are not one or two solutions. So having the experts in the room locally and having buy-in was very important. So luckily we talked to the right folks, and Judge saw the the benefits of having something like this. We brought other people in. Mark was on board, Denise was on board, then Matt jumped in. So it's really to stop working out of silos and get the right people in the room, and also know when you have time or opportunity to discuss these issues, or talk about different solutions. And again, the only solution might not be, hey, let's send them to Pueblo. Maybe locally we can come up with a different solution, maybe even exit them out of the criminal justice system if the criminal justice system is not the best solution for some of these. Again, we have clients that have dementia that are in their 80s, 70s, and hey, sit in the jail for 7 months and maybe Pueblo will do something is not always the best option. So being creative, being collaborative, and having the same philosophies moving forward. DA and public defender don't always agree, but at least we know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and bring up, possible solutions. So the goal was, understanding the whole spectrum of needs of people in this docket. Again, dementia, TBI, substance abuse, homelessness, and trying to find collaboration. Summit Stone's been a huge partner as well. Before this docket, I had to bring people into the office and talk Summit Stone into seeing them. It did not always work out. So just having them in this room and having the conversations with them. We have meetings with the jail every week. We have meetings with Summit Stone about the outpatient folks every week. And again, so it's not magic. It's just having time and place to have these conversations is how we've gained some success. I'm assuming I'm probably going over.
You're
5
over.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
I'm going to have to play some Academy Award music here to keep us on schedule. So no, and I don't know why you're not saying it is total magic happening between all of these like Hollywood squares on this Zoom call. So Mark, so Jean is our coordinator essentially for the competency docket and is kind of like this liaison for us from the judicial aspect to what's boots on the ground actually happening on the cases. And Mark is over at the jail. Mark, if you want to tell a little bit about what you do and then jump in, maybe also just talk about maybe what you saw and why you thought this was important to create.
Yes. So my name is Mark Stiger. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health here at Lamar County Jail. So part of it is, competency has always been a confusing thing. A lot of times we're looking for competency to stand trial, but I would say majority of that time is we're seeing that those competency individuals are also have SPMI or severe persistent mental health issues. And so they kind of get really lost in this system. Prior to having competency court, like kind of Jean said, it was a very broad system, and we would have people where it felt like they were kind of falling through the cracks, that they kind of got lost within the jail system. Our average stay, usually for competency, before our competency court was almost a year, about 243 days, they would remain in jail from any type of charges, just kind of waiting through that competency process. And so when we started this, I think our goal was twofold: is how do we speed up the competency process for them to, be competent for court, and also to address that mental health piece. For my end, this was my selfish thing, is to get that mental health therapy and medication and all of that process within the jail to kind of bind those together, where we're also pursuing competency and helping people with the mental health aspect. Anything else, Judge?
No, I think
I'm trying to keep it short.
I know you did a great job. We're going to open it up at the end. People might have some direct questions for you, particularly because you have that perspective from being in the jail and supporting folks in there. And so let me just kind of change a little gears about how people actually come into the program and how we process those cases. So next we're going to hear from the public defender and the district attorney. Mr. Matt Landers is from the public defender's office. Mr. Michael Mangione is from the DA's office. If you gentlemen want to just kind of explain on the criminal aspect, like how the flow happens and how the magic happens between those two sides.
Sure, I'm going to jump in here. Mr. Landers and I discussed earlier. So Matt, feel free to jump in on the back end if you like. My name is Michael Mangione with the district attorney's office. And the way I was going to break this down was the judge asked me to talk about sort of referrals and how people come into the program. This is a sort of unique program in that we actually get the referrals from the original courtroom. So they actually come in from the judges. But the types of candidates that we're looking for, Jean sort of touched on it, Mark's touched on it. It's not really a one size fits all. It's these people that have sort of fallen through the cracks, as Mark said. So people that are not competent, that could use some consolidated resources to expedite the process of trying to see if we can get them restored to competency. And I mean, I guess quickly evaluate if they are competent, and if they are not, get them restored to competency as quick as possible. Or if that's not feasible, see if we can expedite the case to whatever resolution needs to happen. Competency is an interesting issue in that anyone can raise it at any time. So it puts things on hold as far as the criminal process goes. And then they come to us. And then, as has been talked about, we sort of get to utilize all of our resources, all the various team members, and see if we can't keep things from falling through the cracks. So good candidates that we typically see, they don't really fit a universal template, but some combination of we're assessing a person's mental health needs and we're looking at the crime alleged from the district attorney's standpoint. So, for instance, a low-level offense with a person who has a history of doing this sort of behavior and a history of mental health issues that are obvious when they're committing these crimes, they might be a good candidate to get in and get them plugged into services and see if we can just kind of get the case moving along. But it also might be the case that a bigger crime with more at stakes in terms of community safety, or if someone is a risk to a particular victim, they might be a good candidate as well, because the quicker that we can discern what a pursuit of justice looks like in that case, the quicker we can either inform the victim of our decision or make a public record of the efforts we've been making and so forth. And at the end of the day, that might mean us pursuing a conviction, or it might mean dismissing a case. But either way, we're more informed, and so are the parties that have a more vested interest. Occasionally, and this is my last point that I'll make, and I'll kick it over to Matt. Occasionally, when we bring people in, we do modify their bonds in a way that historically probably hasn't been done. So what we're looking for is if someone is in custody on a bond and we're looking to modify something that we might typically not have done so in the past, the statutes favor outpatient restoration. So we're looking at people that aren't going to be a risk to community safety and people that we can find stabilization for through these programs. And we have all these folks that can help them work on those resources. So the goal is, of course, to not have them languish at the jail while we could be actually helping address this mental health issue, and then really get them going on their criminal case, or get rid of their criminal case if that's what's appropriate. Matt, I'll toss it over to you if you have any other thoughts on that.
My name is Matt Landers from the Public Defender's Office. I think Mike did a good job of summarizing it. Just kind of procedurally, what happens is competency is raised generally by the public defender that's in the trial division courtroom. They reach out to me. They say, I'm thinking about raising competency on this case. And then I usually consult with them and we discuss if that's the appropriate avenue. If there's somebody that maybe has mental health issues, but they don't raise to the level of maybe being incompetent, if diversion or exploring diversion could be a better path. So I kind of try to triage that with the trial division deputies to see if we believe that competency is the best decision in terms of raising that. Once that's raised, then it gets funneled into our courtroom. The majority of the time it's raised by the public defenders in the trial division. Sometimes, for instance, in court today, we had it where it was raised by a district attorney. Other times I've seen it raised by judges as well. And as we've been doing this, I think that one benefit is we've started to get to really know the population and kind of the frequent high utilizers in our community that unfortunately we see come back through. And so having the consistency of this group that has already worked with some of these folks and kind of know what some of the underlying issues are, we start out miles ahead of where we would be if it was fragmented and they went into a different silo, like Gene said, or a different courtroom. And so now we have sort of flagged these people if they come back through, so that we know that they have a competency history right out of the gate, and we're able to move a lot more quickly in terms of kind of the referral process and kind of analyzing those things. So that's kind of a quick overview on the referral process.
Yeah, streamlining has been really beneficial, I think, in supporting the folks that are coming into the system, and consistency is super important. We just don't waste time trying to figure out what the judge wants, what the public defender is asking, we are all speaking one language because we've worked together so closely for a while, which is, serves the community well. So let me shift gears for a second. So in Larimer County, we have pretrial services. So we're fortunate enough that we have folks that kind of monitor pre-plea, sometimes post-plea, like how people are just generally doing on their bonds. And so they might be giving urine tests and so forth. And so April Moore works in pretrial services, but kind of has modified the style of pretrial to accommodate this particular docket. And so I would love to pass this on to April just to talk about what kind of supports we provide for people in the program. And maybe after that, Jean can talk about a little bit long-term sustainability planning that we do for the folks that come in. So first, April.
Yes, I'm April Moore with pretrial services. I actually am the lead supervisor for our mental health unit, which has been around for over 15 years. So we specifically do supervise those defendants with SPMI, cognitive developmental delays, traumatic brain injuries, and in order to try to help connect them to community-based resources to meet their needs. In regards to the defendants on the competency docket, you know, a lot of these folks do have difficulty remembering requirements. We set up text reminders for appointments. You know, we're able to assist them in regards to getting to substance monitoring with transportation. We had one individual, you know, that you wouldn't normally do this under pretrial, but was kind of a danger to herself in the community because she would run away. And so we were actually able to monitor her on a GPS device for her own safety, so that if she did disappear, we were able to find her and keep her safe that way. As a part of that, we also do provide regular updates on the docket to the court in regards to how everybody's doing. And we were actually able to obtain a grant this year that allowed us to hire an additional staff person to where we can now supervise almost twice as many defendants as we had been a year ago. And as a part of that grant, we also have funds available to help with basic need items, hotel rooms if necessary. We do a lot of cell phones to help them comply with their competency restoration and other requirements that they have as well.
Thank you, April. And I think it's really important just to highlight, you know, April is there to kind of support. She helps us know, you know, even if there's like substance use going on, so we know maybe where someone might be struggling and how we want to continue to pinpoint. And if someone misses the UAs or something like that, I will say that they are very much like informing the court, but it's not so punitive that we're trying to bring people back to revoke their bonds. It's more kind of helping as part of the team maintain what it is, you know, how to keep people on the right track for this restoration process while they're in the community. So, and she does a great job. Jean, do you want to add anything in and maybe talk a little bit about the evaluations and long-term planning? And then we'll pass it to Jess to get her perspective too.
Sure, thank you. So I'll talk about the evaluations first. So once competency is brought up, the next step is getting a forensic evaluator to complete a report. However, getting people in a room with a doc is often hard. Especially if they're homeless, especially if they don't have phones. So a good chunk of my job was just looking for people and trying to get them into the doc. So with this docket, we created scheduled slots every Wednesday morning and afternoon, and the state was willing to work with us and schedule the docs in the courtroom. So it's actually a bondable appearance. So a couple of weeks prior, the judge gives them a date and they show up and the doctor is waiting in the conference room, and we've had amazing success. I think it's over 90%. I would imagine it's probably under 60 elsewhere, you know, just in the real world, I guess. So that's been a great success, and that's working well with this docket. But also in custody evaluations, we've gone into the jail with tablets and set up virtual evaluations. You know, basically we're willing to do whatever it takes to get this process moving, because without that report, nothing else can happen. And without a finding, they won't go back to the originating courtroom, or if they're found incompetent, then we can order restoration, inpatient or outpatient. But that evaluation is a major piece of this process, obviously. Sustainability, I mean, we can talk about a lot, but April mentioned a grant. We have basic care needs. We've given out probably over 50 phones just to find people, communicate so they can do their mental health treatment, they can do restoration. You know, the goal is to keep them out of the criminal justice system. So if we can set up some kind of stability after this, during this, that's the goal. You know, if they can keep doing therapy with Summit Stone after, we've worked with the Brain Injury Alliance We've recently worked with a local provider he agreed to go into the jail to complete neuro psych evals, and that's a huge win. So I'm going to give Logan Heath a big shout out. He's in the room with me, so he can hear me. But we're just trying to fit in the pieces of this puzzle, because there aren't easy solutions, but we have to keep building and growing and evolving and figuring out creative solutions for a lot of this.
And I think that's super important, just as we're talking about long-term. I mean, if there's some of the brain injury, when they're exiting out of our system, connecting them with the proper resources, that's going to look different than someone with a developmental, delay. That's going to look different than somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia. And so this group is looking at each individual and kind of creating a path for them to be able to maintain when they're not in the criminal justice system. But all of that sort of begins, unfortunately, people usually start in the jails, and Jess is here to kind of talk about the jail-based behavioral services program that she runs. Jess?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Fear. I manage Summit Stone's forensics or criminal justice programs up here in Larimer County. So I have the privilege of managing our jail-based team, which has a competency enhancement component, in addition to our aim and wellness court, which many of our competency clients get diverted to, and our competency enhancement or competency restoration and competency support outside of the Larimer County Jail, for where clients are ordered to outpatient restoration. So basically what we do is work to meet this individual in the jail, immediately start building rapport, helping to develop a plan for them to be able to successfully transition to outpatient. And then once they transition to outpatient, provide them wraparound services to meet all of their barriers to restoration, as we kind of call them on our side. So that is mental health treatment, group treatment, restoration services, help accessing housing vouchers. We partner really closely with Jean's team to help meet all these needs. Denise to help us figure out momentum referrals and all of that from in the jail. And then of course our bridges liaisons to help work with all that. And then we also really work with clients to help support their pretrial bond conditions. And so help them get to their UAs, help them get to their services and access housing and all of these things. And so we really have a spectrum of care from inside to outside of the jail that we're working on doing. And what really happened is that we started restoration about 3 years ago and immediately noted that these clients had significant needs that restoration wasn't addressing. And so we're trying to build not specific ACT team, but kind of like an assertive community treatment type model that will do community outreach, meet clients specifically where they're at behaviorally, substance use in the community, all of that, and then wrap them in the appropriate services to gain that long-term stability. So right now, Summit Stone's working on expanding the competency team with a medication team that will actually be Summit Stone providers meeting clients in the jail, prescribing medications, and then transitioning with that same provider outside of the jail to where we can actually provide medications. And we hope to have an additional location outside of our traditional outpatient offices to serve as a safe place for these clients, a hub for them to access snacks and meals and everything they could possibly need from the community mental health side. So it's almost if you were to combine an ACT team and an aim and wellness court team and like a team for people experiencing homelessness to really wrap around and meet every need that we can, while supporting our county partners and our pretrial partners and the competency docket as well. So a really good example this morning is we had 4 staff at the competency docket meeting with clients, making sure they know when their appointments are, managing some behavioral things that are coming up. Additionally, having staff in the office for clients that were peering remotely and had a bunch of stuff to do with housing vouchers. And so we were able in 2 hours to meet the needs of like 6 clients. And we'll go find them if and when they don't show up for their appointments.
Yeah, you guys are an amazing part of the team as well. So I know you kind of touched a little bit about future of competency court. I think we might come back to you in just a minute, but in the meantime, a lot of times we're asked, what is the goal of your program and how do people exit out of the criminal justice system? And so I think, again, I'm going to pass it to Matt Landers and Michael Mangione, because they really have that perspective of this. There's still this legal component. How are we getting people out? What is the goal? Gentlemen?
Thanks, Church. And I'll start us off here again, Matt, and then I'll toss it over to you if you have any other additional thoughts. Again, a resolution in this case can be pretty varied in these types of cases. And the beauty of this program is it can be a little bit idiosyncratic to whatever the case demands. So maybe a successful closure of a competency court case is the person is restored. We send them back to the original courtroom and their case proceeds as it normally would have. But the goal in that case would be, of course, that we haven't wasted a lot of time. We've seen where we're at with the person, we've seen where we're at with the case, and now it can just move along its normal processes a little bit smoother. But other times we send, Jess started to mention diverting clients. So we have in our office a diversion program. So in that case, what we might do is get an evaluation from Summit Stone. They sign a contract with us to follow that Summit Stone plan. We're not privy to that plan. Then in about 6 months, if all is going well, we just dismiss the case. We recently had a client, it was just before my time coming into the competency court, but she was successfully restored outpatient. She was sort of our gold standard of what should happen here. She was outpatient. She had a lot of services. She was restored. She was sent to diversion. She did really well, and their case was dismissed. And so she's still doing really well. And that sort of success story is what we're hoping for with this program. It worked in this instance perfectly. She was able to get these access to resources. She was able to get her competency restored efficiently. And then she's continued with additional services. And then again, got her case just dismissed. There can be variations of successful outcomes as well. Maybe it's not diversion, but through the competency court process, Mr. Landers and myself might be able to reach an agreement. And instead of bouncing the case around, we just reach a resolution right then and there. Maybe it's a deferred sentence, which is similar, that if they continue with mental health treatment, for instance, or get set up with other services, maybe they get better services through the VA system or something like that, and then their case gets dismissed at the end of a period of time. And then there are instances where it might just be that the interests of justice are best served by dismissing the case outright. Matt's a really good watchdog about making sure he's clocking the timing aspects of cases. When the statute says they can only spend so much time in custody, so to the extent that they do go in custody, he's letting me know, like, hey, look, this person's reaching their timeout status, or this person has had the requisite number of evaluations that we need to determine if this case is still viable. And then he'll file motions to dismiss. And so there are other cases that might fall in between one of those categories. Again, almost everything we deal with requires kind of a lot of thought and can be fairly nebulous. But sometimes there are those cases where a person hasn't timed out. Maybe they haven't had the requisite number of evals. We have a history of knowing this person has difficulty being restorable. And so maybe we just assess the case for what it is. What is the risk to community safety? What is the risk to if there's any potential victims out there? How likely are we able to get this person to where ideally we would want them to be? And maybe at the end of the day, all we can do is sort of connect them with some services and then end up dismissing the case. But, while to some extent that might not be satisfying, it might just be the best thing. And again, it's just Blanco has reiterated, everyone has reiterated. That's kind of the beauty of this case, is we have the freedom to really assess these things, and everyone is informed and all the agencies are on board. So we're not just kicking this thing around and all shrugging our shoulders. So, like I said, successful outcomes don't always look the same. They can take varied approaches. It's fairly idiosyncratic. Matt, do you have anything else to add to that? Or Judge Blanco, do you have any follow-up for that you'd like me to address?
No, I'm just
I think you gave kind of a good overview. I mean, from my perspective, my goal is to try to resolve as many of the cases as I can while still on the competency docket. I think we've had over 70 cases dismissed now. And so a lot of what I try to do is connect with family members and really look at a lot of these underlying offenses will start out with an initial mental health crisis call, where it's, sometimes it's family members that say, I didn't know what else to do. I'm just trying to get them some help. And, they get assaulted by one of their family members, or they end up at the psychiatric hospital and get assaulted, things along those lines. And so, goal number one, if I can work toward a dismissal, either from a timeout perspective or a lot of times I look at their history in terms of competency. A lot of these people have histories of being found incompetent from other jurisdictions. So if I'm able to find kind of their history and looking at some of those evaluations from before, that can be helpful in terms of working toward a dismissal. If we can't get a dismissal, then like Mike said, we try to look at if there's a mental health treatment court option, like the AIM program or the wellness court program, which are through probation. There are cases where we're not going to get a quick resolution, right? The more serious cases, sex assault on a child, crimes of violence, things like that. a lot of times those will require to go back to the courtroom to try to resolve. But I think that one other big thing in terms of the outcome that I've seen be beneficial from the public defender system is that generally we do a courtroom rotation every year. And so some of these cases take a long time to work their way through the system. And in the past, the person would go to the state hospital for a long period of time. There's very little communication or contact with that individual when they're at the state hospital. And then eventually they sort of come back into our system. There may have been a courtroom rotation. The public defender and the DA that are in the courtroom are kind of like, okay, who's this person? What happened? Where were they? And kind of the person has to start from square one. And so now with this collaborative team, the real benefit is, I'm working with Denise and Jean and all these people to sort of keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening with them as they wind their way through the competency system at the RISE program at the state hospital. And so I kind of have an idea how they're doing, if they're trending toward competency. I'm trying to negotiate those cases before they even come back from the state hospital, so that when they do arrive, there's not just this dead time that used to happen before where people would sit for months after they came from the state hospital as people tried to figure out kind of what do we do with the case. And so I think there's kind of benefits from every angle there. But we've had a lot of cases dismissed. I hope to continue to build up the diversion pipeline, which I think is appropriate in a lot of these cases as well.
So I want to be mindful of the time because I know we want to take questions. And we were last going to talk about the future, and I think everyone's kind of touched on it. I mean, there's looking at expansion of diversion opportunities. There is the building of a hub where people can come to be receiving like one-stop shop supportive services. And then there is our process of right now working on having one doctor, one patient, one client, so that there's not a change in cocktails, or that the knowledge and relationship that that doctor is establishing when someone's in the jail doesn't stop the minute that they're out of the jail. And so those are the future of kind of the things I know that people have highlighted. So I'm going to briefly just say that so that we can open it up for questions. And if we don't have a bunch of questions, I would love for Denise to also have a chance to chime in if there's time. So Vincent, I don't know how you usually coordinate. People just put it in the chat box or if they unmute, but we'll just kind of take the lead on how this group usually puts questions forth.
Thank you, Judge Blanco, and thank you all. I think that if there's no objection, let's just hear some for a couple of minutes from Denise, so that your whole team has a chance to present, and then we can stay on till 12:15. And I just have a couple of things to say at the very end.
Thank you, Denise.
Hi, thank you. So I'll keep it brief. I think the perspective that I would share is that, so working for Office of Behavioral Health in the position that I'm in, I see statewide. So I'm working with this team, but I'm also seeing statewide with other navigators in all the judicial districts and the barriers that they have. And so really twofold, what this team has done is by having the judge, the PD, and the DA, it's removed all of those barriers and those long wait times of clients who forgot about, of subject matter experts who didn't understand statutes and how to apply statutes. And so really, I guess I would say by having the competency docket, it kind of just keeps the wheels of justice turning for the clients. And so that's been really beautiful. And I know across the state, that's not the same experience because everybody's in different courtrooms, different PDs, different DAs, and all of that. So that's been really helpful for our clients. And then also the other part is with all that we're doing in the community with competency services, Jean's team, Jess's team, April's team, we're really being able to develop all of the things that we can keep people in the community. And by doing that, we're really reducing risk to the community. So it's really a win-win situation for all. So that's the only thing I would add.
Thank you, Denise. I'm so happy that you're here too. So I think the solution, Vincent, is you just have to figure out how to clone an identical version of each of these people in every community in Colorado. So that's about all we have.
Thank you so much. And, I think that that's exactly the purpose of these Thursday meetings, is to try and accelerate the learning and spread the word, and have an army of folks all over the state that are oriented toward doing this kind of great community health work. I've got
Thank
some
you so much
questions.
for inviting us. And if anyone has any additional follow-up questions for me or members of this team, I'm sure we would all be willing to meet and talk even further about all of the programs and get into specifics and all that.
That's great. And anybody wants to stay on and has a couple of questions, we've got a few more minutes. I'll just mention a couple of things and put something in the chat. We have a document called Model Legal Processes, which is about pathway to civil commitment in communities that's out for examination and discussion by partners working at this intersection, and very much appreciate any feedback or thoughts about that. So I'll link to that. And next week in the afternoons, we're hosting a series of panels. It's a summit on women's mental well-being or women's well-being. And encourage you to join that as available or share the word as well. And I'll put that link in the chat. So any questions for anybody else? And I can ask, I've got a couple of questions if you all still have time.
Yeah, we are happy to stay on and answer some questions for folks if people want to put it in the chat or if they want to unmute, and certainly Vincent, your questions as well.
So I'll go ahead. And I think that many of them, my questions are just around the characteristic needs of the population you're interacting with most often, and wanting to have greater and greater understanding of, who belongs. Let me ask this question. So what percentage or ballpark percentage of folks that you are working with in the context of the competency docket do you perceive as having been potentially divertible earlier on in contact with response systems?
Well, from my perspective, I think that a lot more could be diverted out. And I think that that's part of the collaboration we're trying to build up with law enforcement as well. We have co-responder units here locally who, like we described before, we're starting to recognize more of the high utilizers. And so I'm starting to be in more contact with the co-responders. They're following up with clients that I have had on the competency docket, and they kind of flag them within their system. So my hope is that that's going to continue to increase and expand as we move forward. I think that the net could be broader.
Yeah, I agree. Mark and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, I'm sure Mark can name probably 10 people in the jail that they're there on a misdemeanor, stole a Snickers, walked out in traffic, and now they're stuck there for 7 months because they're waiting for Pueblo. So if locally we had more options, I think we'd all be super excited about that. And we've talked to co-responders, other people. I was in a training a while ago that we need more open doors in this community, and probably all communities. The jail's always open, and that's the quickest and easiest solution sometimes, but it's often not the best solution. So if there was a crisis unit that would take people and maybe the charges weren't moved forward, but like I said, there's probably 10 people we can name easily that should be in a mental hospital or should have got meds the first couple of weeks, but that's easier said than done.
I think it was mentioned earlier that, we're talking about people that, every one of these folks is unique, and it does feel often that they've fallen through the cracks of society, that there are services available or places where they could be receiving help. And so if there was a way that they would connect with all of that without this team doing it post entrance into the criminal justice system, that would be ideal, right? Because the vast majority of the people that we're supporting, it at least feels like when we talk about 70 people being dismissed out of the system, they're getting dismissed oftentimes because they're getting connected with long-term services that they were eligible for before they entered criminal justice. And so to answer your question, I think yes, and I think that that's the direction that that I understand the governor and, Dr. Medlock and folks that are working on these issues want us to be moving that direction. But this is where we're at in the reality of the right now and our best response to be able to help support these folks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Judge Blanco. And that hub that's in development there in your community is intended to meet it, to some extent, that gap of having a better immediate disposition that's open besides the jail, right?
I'm gonna kind of tip it Jess's direction because that grant is gonna rest with Summit Stone, but I think a lot of the population that we're working with, they don't have the same stability factors. So if they come out of the jail, homelessness and all sorts of things are at play. So the hub kind of speaks to that. Jess, do you want to talk about it?
So I think your question is an important one, but I think it absolutely depends on the individual themselves, because individuals within the competency process, it could be their first charge and they could be, a juvenile, or they could have been in the system for 45 years. And so when we're talking about intervention, we really want to look, I don't know if anyone here has heard of like the sequential intercept model. That's a really good model to look at if you're looking at criminal justice interventions across the spectrum. So something like AIM and Wellness Court is like at the high end of the spectrum. These are individuals likely facing like a DOC type of sentence if they don't comply with their probation, whereas some individuals could be eligible for like just a simple 6-month diversion sentence if their behavioral health needs are low enough, which would be like a 0.05 level of intervention. And so the team we've created really tries to spread the interventions across the right spectrum and serve clients, whether they're sentenced to programs or not sentenced to programs, no matter how they're coming in. So I realize I gave a pretty complex answer to that, but that would be my opinion.
Thank you so much. And I'm just checking the chat here. There's been a couple of questions that I see. One has been answered, and Michaela Whitley asks, and we've got 2 more minutes. What kinds of interventions would you like to see to catch people prior to their involvement based on the needs you're seeing in the population?
Matt, do you have any thoughts on that? Or Mark? I don't want to just...
This one is really tricky from the Summit Stone side because we typically don't do a lot with criminogenic factors. We focus a lot on the mental health substance use factors. Of course, we offer evidence-based treatments like mental health or like MRT therapy and things like that. However, as mental health providers, it's not always appropriate for us to work at those we can assess, but there's not a whole lot we can do for those criminogenic needs with our role.
I think we need to develop more community resources for police to use, because when we're trying to normalize mental health, we need to educate and we need to have the resources so that officers, instead of just arresting people and putting them in jail, have an alternative resource. So I think those interventions need to happen and be developed. So
we have first responder units, but it would be amazing, right, if you had that team constantly responding, because so many of the cases we see, it's like 911 is called because the behavior of the individual doesn't match what society is expecting the behavior to look like. And then pretty soon ticket is issued, and then is the entry into the criminal justice system because the person's not listening to the directions of the police, or they're spitting or whatever, they're not following directions. And so, having that perspective, like Denise was saying, is, I think, a game changer for folks. Does anybody else have thoughts on any of that? I'm sure everybody has lots of thoughts on all of these topics. Vincent, I don't know if we answered the questions in the chat, because I know Jean was tackling and so was Denise.
I think so. Thank you, Jean and Denise, and thank you all. And that brings us to our time, and our commitment is it's a 45-minute time on Thursdays, and thank you so much. Please come back, and will be recorded, and the recording will be available later.
Thank you so much.
Take care all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
bye, thanks.